The stadium during the World Cup is one of the last. Anyway, so assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to. Is this like we thought like the last time was actually looking? I thought the last one was last week was the one with Vikram was the last one of Guardians of the Cloud, but today is the last one of Guardians of the Cloud, and we're leaving the most important thing for the end, which is all about identity. How do you, when you have whether it is humans or machines or now even agents, how do you secure them? What is Microsoft Entra? And Peter, who better than Peter to tell us all about that and show us some really cool demos. So we're a small crowd today, so please ask questions. And just like a couple of announcements, we have Microsoft Build going on. Today's day 2 as well. If you've missed the keynote, go watch. There's a lot of exciting announcements happening. We're planning to have a session later in the community to go over some of those announcements. And we also have AI Skill Fest happening. So just go type in aka.ms AI Skill Fest. There's a chance for you to get free certification as well. So go. We sent some notes about that in the WhatsApp group. So do review that. Yeah, Peter, you can have your water first. But then after that, we're gonna get started. So just while that's happening, I also want to hear from you. Yani, what more sessions do you want to have like during the summer? We're planning to do some more hands-on sessions. Maybe we can work on a certification together and so on. Let us know.
We don't give brain dumps here.
Brain dumps. Yeah, we want like more interaction. You guys doing more. Last summer, what we did, I delivered like a 0 to hero Power BI, and like the whole room was filled with people on their laptop. Because last year we celebrated 10 years of Power BI, but this year let's see what we're gonna do. Maybe some AI agent stuff, right? Because everyone's just agent maxing these days. All right, Peter.
Alrighty. Hi. So we'll talk about identity today, and I do apologize, I'm a little bit tired. So we'll focus primarily on cloud. We will not touch upon how identity used to be before, how it is on-premises, because that is not modern identity system, or what we consider modern identity. So this product was previously called Azure Active Directory. It was renamed to Entra ID. So you might see Azure Active Directory, somebody will mention it, or Entra ID, it's actually the same product. And the on-premises directory, which I call legacy, that are built on LDAP and old Netscape LDAP, is called Active Directory. Right? But we will primarily focus on Entra today. So before we start, identity is, everybody now talks about identity being the perimeter, right? Previously, the trust boundary was your firewall, and that was protecting your internal network where your identity was, or was laying or being, let's say, deployed at. And you had different, let's say, platforms that were leveraging login methods that had different, let's say, authentication providers. Some were local, some were custom, some were database, some were LDAP, whatever it is, right? So in the old world, firewall was your perimeter. Now firewall still is the perimeter, don't get me the wrong way, but in the modern world, the boundary or the perimeter is identity, right? And why do we say that? So in the early days when they invented firewalls, everything was sitting behind the corporate firewall. Firewall equals perimeter, therefore your identity was safe now. Coming to early adoption of software as a service applications, and one of them is Office 365 and many others like Salesforce, Workday, or anything else. They basically allow you to access your data anywhere. So the entry point is no longer your perimeter, which is entering into your corporation. It's basically the SaaS application. Ergo, the identity becomes the perimeter. Clear? Questions? Alrighty. So the old model that we talk about on-prem, trust was based on network isolation or your origin, VPN. So tunneling protocols would extend the inside corporate network into your remote location or your phone. And once inside, access is enabled by default based on firewall rules, right? Our new model is basically your identity, and the signals that are coming from your device are deciding on what is happening with your access and what level of access you will have. So overall, every signing will be evaluated by Entra ID. We apply least privilege conditional access and continuous monitoring across the entire life cycle of your login session.
So basically, what this tells us is only through the introduction of SaaS that this become a new perimeter?
Correct. So the identity became the perimeter primarily when SaaS exploded because the boundary of your organization was no longer the firewall. So the firewall was protecting outsiders getting in, but when SaaS exploded initially, when it started being, let's say, adopted by organizations, identity became the perimeter, and not a lot of organizations realize that.
Basic question, but like, why can't the firewall protect the SaaS?
Because the SaaS is residing in the cloud. So you cannot go and tell your operator, your cloud provider like Microsoft, for example, dear Mr. Microsoft, put a firewall in front of Office 365 so I can VPN into the firewall and then access the network, right? So because SaaS is giving you access everywhere in the world, right? Or based on certain criteria and your configuration, but ideally it gives you access from anywhere. So ergo, your identity becomes the first point of contact between you and the SaaS endpoint.
That can be done, right? I mean, we can do that, put a firewall in front of.
Correct. That can be easily done. I can actually show you later on through the, like I'll disconnect from the presentation at a specific point and we can show a couple of examples on that. Hopefully this makes sense. Alrighty. So this is basically what happens when you sign in, right? You have your identity, right? Who is asking, and basically it's you as a user, right? So let's say it's Peter at whatever. You have the Microsoft Graph, basically an API that sits behind everything that's happening in a directory ecosystem, right? So this particular API grants you access, for example, to read specific objects or write objects, create specific permissions, so on and so forth, right? So it gives everything that you see in Entra portal, everything related to your identity is actually accessible through the Graph API itself. Any action taken upon an object like a user group can be done through Graph API. Multi-factor authentication and passkeys. So do you know this concept? Can somebody tell me what is the MFA concept? All right.
Multi-factor authentication.
Okay, what does it mean?
So basically that's when instead of just using the password, use another mechanism along with it to make sure that you are the person who is you are claiming to be. So such as the codes, the authorization codes.
Okay. What are passkeys?
There is some certain words, or you can have a physical passkey as well for the
A dynamic
So
token, basically.
similar, yes. So I will revert back to passkey in one of my slides, but correct and incorrect at the same time what you're talking about. Conditional access. So reverting to the firewalling problem, the rules that grant or block access to a resource. So when you authenticate, you provide your multi-factor authentication, right? There are other signals that are coming in to grant or block that particular session. And that can be, is your device compliant with the organizational policy for devices that are authenticating, which means do you have the right EDR or security stack? Do you have the latest patches deployed? From what IP address you're coming? Have you recently had a security incident on your machine? So there's a lot of signals that can come in that will be factored in the conditional access, including the method you're authenticating. So there is a difference between MFA and phishing resistant MFA, for example, and we will talk about it in a couple of slides. ID protection, this is a security feature primarily within Entra that basically is capable of spotting risky behavior, right? And sign-in risks and risky users, for example, right? So what is a sign-in risk? It's basically during the sign-in process, we've decided, based on a lot of signals, that it's not a valid sign-in, and therefore we will automate a action, whether it is reset the password, revoke sessions, so on and so forth. So that is a sign-in risk. So it's primarily during the sign-in process where we identify that there is a risk. User risk, sorry?
What do you mean by a risk?
So basically coming from a Tor node, for example, right? Or coming from, we've already not noticed that previously your user is authenticated from the office, from a trusted network. You've authenticated successfully. 3 minutes later, the request came from Bangladesh, right? Which means that somebody might have compromised your account, right? So that is the sign-in risk. And there is something which we call risky users, which is basically a lot of other signals that were accumulated over a period of time where we identify that the user is risky. So there is sign-in risk and there is user risk. You need to understand that concept.
But how does it define, like, how does it know it's risky?
Okay, so as Entra is continuously evaluating every particular sign-in session, right? So it will monitor where the user is logging in from, for example, and it can spot a difference between the user like logging at regular intervals from a specific IP continuously, but then suddenly you're coming from somewhere else, right? So like impossible traveler scenarios, which means that at the same time you logged in, let's say now in Qatar, and 5 seconds later, there is an activity coming from your account from France.
It's mainly just through geography and the time travel.
Not only geography, but there are other parameters as well. A lot of other signals that are coming from the part of the conditional access I was talking about, the device itself.
You have the use case where in which condition it will pop up as a signing, risky signing or risky user.
So risky sign is, sorry?
Geographically, this is something, it's generating a lot of false positive and user is using VPN and it's trying to access emails or service from there.
Correct. That is possible, but that is easily.
Yes, you will end up with, a lot of false positive, and then if some conditional access policy you have defined based on risky sign-in and challenging, then it is.
But
Again,
I would ask you one thing, why would your user be allowed to access from a VPN on a corporate resource, from a third-party VPN?
That's easy. I am from my phone. I'm using VPN from somewhere.
Almost
And
all users.
My phone is, I'm having mobile management on my phone. I'm using VPN on my phone as well.
I understand, but there are certain policies that come into play, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe your organization allows you, but most organizations like Consult, I see this as a risk, right? Because again, you're authorizing a connectivity to your corporate system by a third party that can intercept your traffic. We can easily debate, like I've seen.
Most of the time, CISO don't have that authority, because most of the time many users are complaining, and even it goes to C level, and then they are asking us to allow them.
Yes, and I can give you numerous examples of so many organizations that were breached because of this particular scenario, right? So, as I said, like at the previous sessions, I used to work a lot in IR. And the most common thing that we see is that threat actors leverage public VPNs to hide their true origin and location of the attack. And therefore, when you allow your users to actually use VPNs, that inherently becomes a risk from cybersecurity perspective, because you've identified that some of your corporate users use ExpressVPN, for example. And then when somebody else comes in through ExpressVPN, a threat actor, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, dear Mr. CEO, it's because of you who told us to whitelist a VPN provider for our users? Now we get this particular scenario as an example.
Is this conditional? I mean, like, can an organization specify that you cannot like use VPN and somebody else?
Driven
can
by
specify
policy,
you can?
actually.
Then
It's enforceable.
Driven by policy.
From bank application, if you are
Yeah,
having
then-
VPN, it will stop. It says
Yes.
VPN.
Exactly. So there are many factors, and I understand some cannot block VPN, but you can block them signing in from a VPN and tell them, sorry, information security.
And what about the user level? So you are going to flag a user, and then whenever that user sign into another account, so you will mark it as
That user. So for example, I sign in now from a corporate office, right? And I will try to log in from my phone, but my phone is using VPN, right? But what happens at the sign-in level, right? So your phone is already authorized, already signed in. You're not going to re-sign in because you sign into the application once and you have a token that refreshes every now and then, which means that is okay. What will happen is you already signed in from that location once, right? From that VPN provider once. You will see activity from another IP later on because you will continuously hop between different locations. And this can also trigger a incident because you're signing in from one location, but then for many different IPs, you're accessing continuously to your data. Again, this can be flagged as a risk. Clear? All right. So sign-in risk is only happening at the sign-in process. It doesn't happen afterwards. Afterwards, everything else becomes user risk based on the user behavior. Clear? Excellent. Privilege and scope. Last thing. When you sign in, you have something that basically gives you specific access into that particular environment, whether that comes through a role or that comes through a security group that has permissions against specific applications or objects. Clear? Yeah. Okay, we will talk about PIM specifically, admin units and break glass. But do you know what PIM means?
Privilege identity management.
Privileged identity management. What does a break glass mean in an identity scenario?
It's a scenario where you need instant access to the system.
Correct. So when all of your identities, for example, that are enabled with multi-factor authentication. So let's assume your multi-factor authentication process and platform is down. And you always mandate multi-factor authentication, then the only way you can log in is via break glass account because you will exclude your break glass account from the multi-factor policy, as an example.
All other conditional access policy as well.
Yeah, it being done by a conditional access policy. And admin units is something that I really love using, and I will give you that particular example, specifically around restricted management units. So admin unit within Entra is like a small bubble where you can group specific users, right? So what does that mean? Is, as an example, you want to restrict your help desk from being able to reset the CEO's password. And you will say only one particular person that we trust in the help desk team can reset the CEO's password, as an example. This is where these admin units come into play. Correct. So you're basically able to define your break glass accounts into the restricted management access unit. And you can also do your CEOs, for example, and your sensitive users, your finance team or whatever. So then there is no insider threat of somebody resetting their passwords because they will be prevented. I can show you right now, like in a demo, later on, where I am the global admin in the tenant and I cannot reset a user's password or I cannot delete his password as well, like change the password, reset, or anything else, or even delete the user.
And even disable the user, yes. It is prevented as well, yes.
Correct. You cannot do anything to these users that are in a restricted management, right? It's a really interesting concept. Okay, clear here? Questions? Sure.
For the break glass account, are they usually like privileged accounts or do they also have restrictions?
They are usually privileged that you use them in a case of emergency. But one thing you need to know that since September 2025, Microsoft, even for any type of account that has a privileged role, mandates MFA. So the only way you can achieve the break glass account now without the MFA is by using FIDO2 keys or passkeys, right? We'll talk about it in a few seconds, actually. All right. So who gets a digital identity primarily, right? Users, employees, they get an ID. Devices, they get an ID. Applications, so when you work in Azure, you have something called managed identity. It can get a dedicated identity, right? Workload IDs. So also one thing, if you know about Entra, you can register applications, either they're enterprise or app registrations, and you can use them to authenticate against your directory with a specific credentials, right? And you can assign them specific permissions and roles. So all of them are part of the identity system. And Fatima mentioned one thing earlier. Since a couple of months, we've also introduced agent identities or agent IDs. So what's the difference?
Agents are for systems and the normal ones are for.
On behalf of the user,
Agent IDs are assigned to Copilot agents or Foundry agents, basically any agent that you develop in your infrastructure. Okay? So
Would you argue it's just the same as an app registration?
planning to ask the same question.
correct. So what's the difference? So when you're creating an app, right? And you can look at it as same as actually a managed identity of an Azure resource. Compare it to that level, right? Why is it important? Because when you create an app registration, you need to create a secret, put it in a key vault, you need to manage it, rotate it, and so on and so forth. When you leverage a managed identity, what happens? You don't have to rotate anything. You have to use the Azure SDK to grab the identity details, right? Similarly, it's the same for agents. So you don't have to create secrets, rotate them, manage them, so on and so forth. You create an agent ID, managed identity for an agent and dedicate to that agent.
So
Make
is an
sense?
agent more like a user, just not a human, basically?
I call an agent, and I did that recently on a session with some CISOs. I call an agent specifically an employee that's on your payroll that consumes money of the organization, that has access. But the question is, do you know about his or her existence or not? What does it mean? Like shadow IT, shadow AI, right? So ideally, you can have as many agents, you can manage it, but do you know about it? Do you know what it's supposed to do? So on and so forth. And this is why it's important to have an ID for the agent.
Question.
Sure.
So if I have an agent on my laptop and it has like a digital ID of an application,
Yes.
it cannot, like, does it like assign, like does the Entra assign an application ID, a digital ID to the agent or not?
So this is part of Agent 365 platform, which leverages Entra, right? So when you do have agents and agent ID functionality implemented in your organization, so any agent that is deployed within the ecosystem itself has its own dedicated ID. When you go back to the app registration scenario that our colleague here was mentioning, it's you who has to assign that. And the problem is that you can assign the same identity to multiple different agents. And that can create a scope creep of an agent, right? Because when you assign permissions to an agent on that particular app ID, and let's say you assign 10 different agents, and they have access to 10 different systems, what you subsequently have done is you granted 10 employees access to 10 different things that some of them should not have access to, as an example.
Yeah, if I give them the application ID? It's not the agent ID.
Yeah, if you give them application ID, you need to follow, again, the same process of assigning one ID for one agent. But then it's up to you to continuously maintain.
I mean, is it going to work the same?
That depends on your coding.
I mean, if I have like a Copilot, it has an application digital ID. Is it going to operate the same as like if it has an agent ID?
Mm,
Or
It's gonna run the same way, right? So you can run your application in the same way, whether you're using an agent ID or you're using, let's say, app registration. That's in your code itself of the agent and the framework that you're building it on, right? Sorry, Fateh.
What's the workload ID?
So basically, the workload ID is primarily the managed identity for a resource. So when you do run, for example, if you run Chrome, no, not Chrome even. So any Azure service, when you open Azure, for example, a virtual machine, it has a managed identity option. You can enable it. So what it will do is when you use the Azure SDK for managed identity, you don't have to give a secret to that particular machine to leverage it, right? So it's leveraging based on existing SDK. So you don't manage the identity, like provision it, put the secret code and everything else inside. Yeah. And it can be done on practically any resource, like even Log Analytics has its own managed identity, key vaults, and many other things. And it's used in scenarios like key vaults or giving access to an application, right? Hopefully this makes sense. All righty. And one important thing is you can apply conditional access policies to agents, same as you apply to humans. This is how we control the agent behavior, right?
Is it gonna control the user access or the agent access? The
Agent
condition is running on the agent
on the
itself?
agent itself, yes. So the conditional access policy is the one that dictates to the agent, but agent has the ability to execute activities as a user, right? So when the agent executes something, it will check the user context. Does the user have permission for this data to be seen, right? So for example, when you talk about specific HR data, and let's say you have an agent that can access HR data, right? So what you will say to the agent is, here you have access to log in, you can use the system. To the user, you will say, you only have access to that particular data set, right? So payroll has access only to see how many months you've been in the company, what's your salary, right? And what's your bank account. HR has ability to see everything, as an example, right? So now when somebody interacts with the HR agent, you need to basically have the same rights you have as a user. So that means that when the agent is impersonating that particular user, it's going to inherit the context of that user and the permissions for that user, which means that it will not overshare information or provide information it's not supposed to. Make sense?
So the agent can have only like one, let's say agent has an HR role, you gave permission for an HR
system,
yes. HR system. And a payroll system, user can access that agent, right?
Correct. Let's say payroll can access, but payroll user cannot access
HR system. The other
specific details, right? It can access only what payroll has access to in the HR system.
based on the user.
Based on the user, yeah.
So the overlap, basically, the intersection between them.
So you're basically just trying to make sure that the user doesn't get information he is not entitled to. So that's why there is impersonation of the user or checking of the user roles, right?
This is what we call the on behalf of auth.
On behalf of, correct.
So if I have like a user account, how many digital IDs I need on my that device?
Only you.
But I'm using agent and I have applications.
Yes, but if you have as many, so every agent will be given an ID. So it's not you who's going to have an ID, it's going to be an agent.
Who gives it that ID? Is it through Agent 365?
So through Agent 365, yeah. So you're managing that identity. Usually it's your application team, right? Or your AI team.
You make it like you mandate, because like, in an organization, you have like each department using their own SDK to create agents.
So if you go back to Agent 365, we have some mandatory details for every agent. So there is an owner and a custodian, right? So this is what's important for every agent ID to be specified. And the most important one is actually custodian, because that is the person who is responsible for that particular agent. Owner can be a business unit of an organization, like your manager or whatever. But the custodian is the engineer who developed that application, who has to maintain it, right? So
It's complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just mentioned that every agent have one digital ID. So if we are like multiple users in the organization, we are using the same agent.
you don't have to. So there is on behalf of activity that agent does. So agent will do an activity on your behalf. So that's how the agent will know you are a user that's requesting the agent to do something. And the agent will do that activity as it is you. So with your rights, your permissions, it doesn't need a new ID.
Yeah, so it's like everybody's using the same agent.
Yeah. Who has access for that agent?
But it customizes the output based on the privilege you have as a user.
Exactly. So inherits, again, your roles, privileges, and everything else. Okay. Auth N and Auth Z. Have you ever heard these words before? Okay.
I didn't, I just found that they have a short term. I never knew they were.
Yeah.
Correct. Authentication and authorization. So who you are, how you prove that this is you, and what are you allowed to do. It's the concept of any identity system. If you take it back into LDAP, it's exactly the same. If you take it to Radius, TACAX, they all use the same thing. Who you are and what is your authorization.
Could you explain those terms like you just said?
Which one, Radius?
Yeah, LDAP, Radius. So those are like the on-premise sort of.
Those are the protocols organizations use for different things, right? So LDAP is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, which is developed originally by Netscape and adopted by Microsoft. So Active Directory is actually an implementation of LDAP, right? And it's storing objects based on OUs, like organizational units, and that's where specific objects go inside of it, right? So Radius is a accounting that was developed primarily for service providers, I believe. And that's, if you remember before, in the old times when we would actually authenticate against a modem on the other side. ICE is a device that allows you to authenticate as, it's a network access control appliance, right? But primarily, if you do remember before when you would dial up into your ISP, you would basically authenticate via the Radius or LDAP protocol, right, depending on the backend itself. But that data of who you are will be transmitted over the PPP link itself. It's a very complicated legacy protocol, by the way. And TACAX is a Cisco implementation of Radius that is more advanced. Accounting and provisioning for firewalls and switches and routers that they use. And ICE is one of the products that has that implementation itself.
You remind me of my college networking class. I think we took this, but never touched it again. Yeah.
So again,
These concepts
apply everywhere, right? So they apply authorization and authentication and accounting, but accounting is in Radius, right? Primarily, this is what it is. Clear?
So yeah, Radius is the server and the LDAP is the protocol.
No, LDAP.
It's different things.
Everything, basically, Radius is LDAP is let's say, protocol itself, right? It operates on port 389, legacy one, unencrypted, encrypted on 636 over TLS or SSL, right? So basically, it's a protocol that handles authentication. So you can say who you are and execute an activity, right? Same is for
Basically Radius as well, right?
Yes, but in a different protocol, right? So they are protocols primarily.
So
Authentication.
so they are the same, but like different systems.
Correct. Different protocols. They serve the same purpose, but different ways. But Radius can use its own database or it can use LDAP. So for example, in Microsoft ecosystem, you can deploy a Radius to authenticate and validate users against an LDAP backend Active Directory. But again, let's not waste time here. We can talk more details.
Yes, I'm asking because I never understood the difference.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, so Entra ID combines all of that together. So it combines the directory where users, groups, devices, apps are stored, so identities and objects. Single sign-on, you can sign in once, and basically it's going to be federated across all of the services, whether they are Microsoft services or third-party, if you do the IDP integration and SAML integration. And then you have the access control, which is multi-factor authentication, governance, conditional access policies, and everything else. It's not the same. It uses modern protocols. I was saying SAML is one of them, OpenID Connect, OAuth, and so on. So does anybody know these protocols?
So ADFS is the.
ADFS is SAML. So ADFS bridges the world of on-prem and this one, correct. And it's used for federation also between different organizations.
Can you explain SAML more? That's the first time I heard SAML.
All right, I'll dedicate for you after that because it's a very, very lengthy topic to talk about. SAML and OAuth are very, very lengthy topics to talk about, but I will cover them for you outside. All right.
I think they are just like single sign-on, but for authorization.
We'll cover it. Let's put it like that. It's very detailed. Okay. So what is Graph? It's basically an API endpoint, Graph API, where we do everything for your devices, for your sign-in policies, for your users. Everything that's happening in Entra ID can be seen and can be done through the Graph API itself. It's basically whatever you can do in the UI of Entra, whatever you can search for there, you can exactly replicate that via the API itself. So when you type the AZCLI command and you need to interact with certain Graph components, like with Entra or whatever, it's going to use the Graph API. If you're using the PowerShell commands to connect to Entra and do activities, it's going to use the Graph API in the back. If you use the UI, you're clicking through the UI, probably it has some backend component that communicate to the Graph API. Right? All right. Multi-factor authentication. Great. So why it's important? Up until beginning of 2010, we were always focusing on password only in 99% of the times, unless you were working for a bank and you were having the electronic banking, where they were forcing you with those old RSA tokens or whatever you were using. Right? So with the implementation of MFA initially with Microsoft, you had an authenticator that can run on your phone, generate codes, or bring you up a notification, or voice call or SMS message will be sent to you. Then, because this was being abused by a lot of threat actors, then we decided to do authenticator and a number match, which means that when you log in, you'll get prompted with a number. Your authenticator will come up and say, can you validate the number from your screen? So to ensure that it's you who is actually authenticating a little bit. And the most important one, which we are talking about the phishing resistant, is FIDO2 or passkey. So it's the most secure option for you to log in right now. So a lot of organizations that I worked with since 2015 are sitting either between this or this layer right now. This is a very recent implementation, the 5.2 primarily. I think it's Windows Hello came 2022, I believe, something like that. Organizations started adopting it. So we are pushing primarily for phishing resistant MFA, right? Why is that important? It's on the next slide. It binds you to that particular site you're trying to authenticate. So we are trying to avoid the adversary in the middle type of attacks or theft of your token, right?
On the middle.
Exactly. So how threat actors started stealing your identity is that they will send you, for example, a phishing email saying, please authenticate here. You'll open the website and it's going to be your login page of your company. You'll see the Microsoft login page. Everything is displayed perfectly. You will put your username, password, but it's an evil website. And basically they take the token that is bound to your session that you authenticated, and then they reuse that token. So that is with typical MFA, right? So that is still possible. That's still happening even right now. The only way to tackle that is by using phishing-resistant MFA with passkeys or 5.2 keys, right? So even if you approve that particular session through phishing-resistant MFA, they cannot reuse the token. That's the goal. So coming back to the question of the colleagues from, I believe you worked in an MSSP, right? You work for MSSP, right? No? Almira, yeah, sorry. When users are using MFA, right, and they're using VPNs, sometimes you might use a VPN that is not, let's say, correct, right? So they might be a fake VPN that steals your data. So when you authenticate the session, they might steal your code and reuse it. It becomes an inherent risk.
It avoided with this one.
With the phishing resistance, because the way it works is a little bit different. So when the device authenticates with a phishing resistant MFA, that is bound to that device. So it cannot be reused on another device. But it also validates the site. So because of how authentication works, right? So when you call a website up, there are certain parameters that are presented to you on the authentication session. So that data cannot be used because, like,
That will be compared.
correct.
The system and the website is compared.
It's being compared, yeah. So you cannot fake it. Let's put it like that. So it's becoming more difficult for this type of attacks to succeed.
Need a clear guideline because I tried to enable phishing resistance MFA
Yes?
and it created a lot of noise. I mean, even the legitimate account, legitimate computer is also not able to log in, not to log in.
So just let's cover, I will cover that in briefly. So to have phishing resistant MFA, if we are using passkeys, right? And that can be implemented on the Microsoft Authenticator application itself. You need to have Bluetooth on your computer. It operates via Bluetooth. So these two devices need to be next to each other. So if you see the screen, I can actually try to log in right now. Give me a second. Excellent. I will use my phone and I will share my screen. So this is my demo environment, right? So I will log in. So it's going to tell me whether I'm logging in with a security key or iPhone, iPad device. I will come with my device. I will open up the authenticator and I will try to scan that particular code. So I will scan it. And here it's saying connecting with another device, which means I have to be physically close to the device to approve it. It uses Bluetooth itself. So one thing is that when you do enforce this type of, let's say, logging mechanism, right, you need to have the underlying infrastructure to support it. One is if you're using passkeys and primarily authenticator, you need to have Bluetooth enabled, right?
Isn't it so difficult for the user? I mean, practically, if you want to implement,
No. It's an small overhead for authenticating only, and you authenticate only once, right? Depending on your settings of your Entra ID, right? But ideally, you're authenticating only once. Make sense? Or you can use a physical key like YubiKey tokens.
have any other way, like the token expiry or some smart mechanism to understand if someone is using the stolen token?
It's primarily through phishing resistant multi-factor authentication, right? That's the only way to protect your token.
Like you have one portion where you said risky signing, correct? Risky signing is the intelligent platform, which is not only there might be a lot of use case, right? In certain scenarios, it will pop up and then challenge the user.
It will pop up
Yeah,
on sign.
take some actions.
Correct.
I'm thinking in that direction because phishing resistance, I tried a lot. I mean, it's really difficult for the user. End user is heavy.
You need to plan it correctly. So that's the primary aspect of it. So it is there, but it's you need to plan it accordingly for your organization. So first you start with your IT team that's gonna be more.
Self
Yes,
frustrated.
but that's where you polish it, right? And then you have another approach to deploy it fully.
So we saw one attack, just sharing the incident.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I think he's not done with
Finish. Yeah.
something.
So the incident was in this direction, like because end user will also use their personal device, right, to log in the emails. So what we noticed, because everything in place, MFA, every user has to go with MFA. There is no choice. So we found that attacker was successfully steal the token, but it is impossible from our corporate device because we already have a lot of controls in place. But in your personal device, we don't have any control.
You
So
can have.
yeah, but in personal device, endpoint is not from our side, right? So in that direction, the device was already compromised before, and then attacker was able to steal the token from his personal device, and then he was trying to share the file here and there.
Quite common thing, right? I can relate to it a little bit differently as well. In one of the incident response, let's say I've done previously, we had evidence of something bad happening, but all the other components were not showing that particular activity. So where the user was sitting, we were seeing that particular malicious behavior, those malicious artifacts, but the firewall, network, and everything else was not telling that story. So how did the attack actually happen is that they compromised the user's personal phone and they leveraged everything through that phone. But because it was a corporate profile, the data was synced to the corporate browser of that particular user. So you were able to find the forensic evidence of things happening, but it happened from a compromised phone. So ultimately, the thing what I'm trying to say here is the moment you allow your users to bring their home devices or their own devices into your environment, you need to have control over it, right? There is no other way. If you allow them, it's going to be extremely problematic from
Really,
a point.
the only control we can place is MAM policy, like mobile access management, where we containerize the thing and secure the data.
We can talk about it definitely. That falls under another aspect, not only identity, but it covers many other aspects. But there are controls you can enforce even on non-corporate devices that you can have a secure environment.
With Intune.
With Intune, correct. Like, for example, again, my phone, it's my personal phone, but I have two profiles. I have personal profile, which is all of my personal apps, and the work profile where all of my work apps are there. And the work apps are not sharing memory with the personal apps. So they're on a completely isolated partition within Knox itself, right? On the Android phones. So there are different mechanisms you can definitely employ. But it's not an identity problem. It's more a mobile device management problem, an endpoint problem. Okay.
Just doing a time check. We have 30 minutes left.
Okay, no, we have maybe 4 more slides, so it's okay. So conditional access policy, it's pretty much if-then statement, right? So if you have done programming in your university or whatever, it's if these are the parameters, then you can basically enforce a control, right? Or an action. So who is the user that's logging in? From where it's coming from? Is the device managed or compliant? Which app is the user requesting to log into? And how risky is that particular session? And based on that, we take specific steps. And this is pretty much automated from that platform, right? So this is how we control these risky sessions, for example, what our colleague was explaining, right? So once we identify that something is risky from these parameters, we can block the access, we can revoke the sessions, we can do a lot of other things. And this can be done actually automatically, or if a certain criteria is met. So for example, if the risk of the user is high, automatically revoke all sessions, all tokens, reset credentials, require the user to re-authenticate, change credentials, change MFA mechanisms, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of steps you can take, and even automated steps, right? Is this clear? All right. Let's go through one policy. User opens Outlook for the very first time. And let's assume we are not using integrated authentication between your on-premises provider and your cloud. They sign in, which means user opens up Outlook, they sign in. Then we do the evaluation cycle. What will happen in the evaluation cycle? We will determine what is the application, who is the user, where they're logging in. Is the device compliant? Once we have all of these signals coming in from that particular session, we will decide what's going to happen. So we will decide whether they get multi-factor authentication as a request. Will we identify it's risky? We will tell the user to change the credentials and reset their MFA. And then outcome will be based on the decision part, right? Whether it is reject or allow access. Very simple.
This from outside the country, so it's based
No,
on
anywhere.
what it says in the thing.
Yeah, but that's
Like in this scenario, so it's based on, for example, the
correct.
country where the account was created.
No. Where the account is signing in from. So what you want to say is, if I'm authenticating from my organization, from the IP that I know it's my organization, right? You can set up different, less restrictive policies, right?
Communication because IP is giving me that you are in the organization.
You're in my organization, exactly. And you're using a compliant device. I know you're sitting in your organization on a compliant device, and I can create less restrictive policies for you. And I will say, if you're sitting in my corporate office and you're using a corporate machine that's validated.
Things that I don't need to check about.
So, and I will say, okay, then even if the user is a sign-in risk for whatever reason, I can still allow it because it's a trusted device and whatever not. But if it's coming from outside the organization and I have a sign-in risk, I will block it, right? That's the idea of it. in a nutshell. Clear? Questions? No? Excellent. So we are talking about risk. So there are multiple ways a user can be flagged for a risk, or a session can be flagged for a risk. I'll give you one example. If you get a notification on your phone, but you have not initiated the login session, you can say, I did not authorize this login. I did not start this login. So what that will do is automatically flag it to Entra and say, that's a sign-in risk, user at risk. Why it becomes a user at risk? Because credentials are leaked, or they guessed the password without a password string. So that is based on user reaction to a problem. So you received on your MFA device, you received that somebody started a session, you say, I did not start it. It's going to flag in your user that your account is compromised. So what will happen then? Every subsequent login of your organization, when we follow the conditional access policy, any activity by your user is going to be now revoked.
Can I ask, sometimes the user to set the password? It's fine.
Yeah, next time they log in, but you can also do other activities, right? But still, they need to have the multi-factor to get to the page to reset the password, for example, right? We talked about token theft and MFA fatigue. So what is that? So what is MFA fatigue? Have you heard this term before?
I'm just guessing here, but when you enter the codes wrong for a couple of times, maybe?
Not wrong. MFA fatigue is when they know your password, you have a multi-factor authentication enabled, and they keep on sending you the authentication thing, hammering you exactly. So now there is a way to determine that, and it comes as a risk signal, which means that after so many failed sessions, I will mark the account as compromised by default.
Why would they do that in the first place? The attackers.
Believe it or not, they're trying to annoy you so much to the point that you agree and approve the session. And this is how one of the famous companies, I'm not going to name it, got breached. They just MFA fatigued an administrator of the company until he signed in. He received over 200 authentications at night, and he thought it might be some of his service account or his account, he left it somewhere, and then he approved it, and then it was game over. Quite interesting thing. Token theft, I talked about it. And if we identify an IP from a core node or a VPN node, we can automatically flag the user at risk, right? Or a risky signing. It all depends.
So he could have just once clicked, it's not me, right?
No, he clicked once, it's me.
No, I'm saying to prevent that. He
To
would
prevent, yeah, it's not me. All he had to do, it's not me. And then it will be game over
kept going until.
until he.
The leak credential, is it something like dark web monitoring is done by Microsoft and then validating the credential, or?
So there are certain signals that are coming in. We don't actively, I don't know if Entra is actively monitoring the dark web continuously, but there are leak credential websites and things where these are published. Therefore, we do have certain detections that are related to that. But ideally, if you're looking for leak credentials, you should have your own threat intelligence vendor for that dark web monitoring, and you can get these signals into your SIM, and from there you can use them as an indicator. Make sense? All right. Privilege role, least privilege wins. So you have different roles like global admin, full control of the tenant, user administrator can manage users, reset passwords, can manage groups. Help desk can reset passwords for non-admin only, right? So anybody that's not privileged, so on and so forth. So always, when you talk about these privilege roles, always select the most minimum role you need for conducting your work or the user to do the work. Tell me.
I don't understand.
Okay. PIM, we are talking about privilege only when you need it. What does it mean? Basically, we assign, you as an admin can assign package of roles to a particular user or group of users and tell them you need to activate it. And you have different ways of doing this, right? But why this is important? It's because it is time-bound, which means that you need to go request your privilege. You need to state for how many hours you need it, what is the purpose of it, and then you send it for activation. Now, based on your policy that you configure, you might say anybody requesting global admin must be approved by other 2 members of the team, because it's a very sensitive permission. So somebody else needs to say, yes, I approve you to get these type of permissions for the session. So your manager or your auditing team is the one that will be doing such an activity. I can actually show you that on my tenant right now. Yes.
The difference between this and break glass?
So there is no difference between it. Break glass is an account where you disable all of these controls and you use it when nothing is working in your tenant.
Emergency.
You use it only in case of emergency. So you know when you see in buildings like break glass only in case of emergency, that's where the term is coming from, break glass. In case of emergency, break the glass, right? So that's how it goes.
Just in time access. So you only get
JIT. This is JIT, exactly.
Yes.
the access is specific, like you only are able to change things in the database for a specific time period that you have more control over. For example, in a lot of organizations, let's say a vendor comes in and they work on like the company system, they will not get access indefinitely, right? Because maybe like, you know, they don't need access outside of work hours. They don't need access after they participate. So that's why PIM is really helpful.
And last but not least, boundaries. So we have these boundaries such as administrative unit and restricted management as well, right? Administrative unit. So why they're used, right? So they're great to protect your sensitive accounts, your CEOs, your finance directors, your break glass accounts, your privileged accounts. And it prevents global admin that is not meant or not located in that group from modifying any permissions within it. And I can show you that right now. So we are going into the demo section now, right? I'll just briefly show you all of these things. I will log in now to my account. Again, my phone should be. Leave it. Is this one? Yeah, that one. Okay, so
You're gonna show us a demo
yep,
of what?
everything we talked about. It's very fast, so
The pizza's early this time.
I cannot believe it. Alrighty. I'm authenticated. And I'm going to show you now the first thing is how you prevent the attacker in the middle scenario. So it's telling me that invalid challenge request. So what has happened here?
Session was for my mobile and it was used in some other laptop in some other place.
I started the session on one browser and I wanted to carry over in another. And it didn't work. Now let's try again. Connecting, sign in, authenticate.
A good question. In the sign-in, you were mentioning earlier the Bluetooth part of it. So the Bluetooth is just added for the distance.
No. So these two devices can exchange cryptographic data because your cryptographic data is protected by your biometrics here.
Yeah, basically, my question is because Bluetooth, like after quite some distance, then it doesn't really work.
Correct.
So did they use Bluetooth in this case to make sure that the two
No,
devices are in the
it's
same?
because it's mostly common media, right? Okay. So what I need to do now is I need to elevate my privileges, right? So as we were talking about PIM, I need to get my particular role activated. So I'm eligible to become global admin. I will go say activate. You will say how many hours you need, this particular, and you can define the maximum length of it. And what is the reason? And now we're going to start activating the role. This takes a couple of seconds. If there is a policy that somebody else needs to approve it, somebody else will receive an email saying, Peter just tried to activate his global admin privileges, please approve. Right?
But sometimes it's only for notification, so
Sometimes notification, but it depends on your policy.
it's activated, so it's pre-approved.
Pre-approved, yes. So you have pre-approved, but it all depends on your policy. So if you're enforcing it, then you need to basically get that particular permission, right? So somebody else needs to validate.
And Peter, so as an admin, to see the logs for all of these things, for example, you put a description there and all that, the place to see this would be in Azure Monitor,
Actually, it's within Entra, but
within Entra itself.
Entra only keeps 30 days of data, specific data. But if you want more data, I will open that specific portal now and show you. Just allow me a second. So Entra has its own dedicated portal, or you can use the one within Azure, right? So it's same here. If I type Entra, Microsoft.com, it's going to be the Entra portal itself, right? So going to the logs, if you want to maintain logs for a bigger period of time, more than 30 days, so by regulations in Qatar, we need to do 120 days.
Yes.
Right?
So we integrate with our backend SIM.
Correct. You integrate with the diagnostic settings, and you will say what data you need to send, right? And when you see here, let me see if I can zoom in. Yeah, you have a lot of different diagnostic settings that can be sent to your SIM.
These are like Sentinel tables.
No, these are log analytic tables that are seen in Sentinel, but you can also use all of this data, all of these logs, and send them via Event Hub or storage account, and they will be stored in a specific format, Parquet, right? So you will set up your data that you want to log, right? So you can see here that it's sending all of the data to a log analytic workspace, right? So I can easily query that data or based on the Event Hub that I'm also using, right? So that data, and you can see some data I am not sending as an example. But going back, you want to investigate these particular problems. And let's see the audit logs or sign-in logs. So here you will be able to see user sign-ins, interactive, non-interactive, service principals, managed identities, and so on. And now you'll see the status of my multi-factor authentication being rejected because I was trying to carry over the session in another browser as another device, right? This will take a little bit of time. It usually takes up to 10 minutes for data to be seen here.
For the MFA got rejected, is that like a policy applied by default, or we have to?
So it's because I use phishing resistant MFA, right? Particularly. So what does that mean is I cannot replay the session on another device. I cannot reuse the token on another device.
Can I disable that kind of policy?
No, for phishing resistant, this is why it's built. If you use a regular MFA, that can be done, right? They can steal your token. It will take a couple of minutes for the login session to appear.
Yeah, while it's loading, I have a question.
Sure.
So for the fast identity online video, it's using a token, and alongside with it, it's using the device information to authenticate. So like, why we don't usually use the device information alongside the session ID? Isn't it the same thing?
I will answer that question in a second. So just allow me. So this is the restricted management break glass, right? And I've put the user sample user into this particular unit. As you can see, my current is admin. I'm a global admin. And if I come to this user and I say, remove, nothing, he's still here. I click on the user and I say, this user is a so limited and administrator scope can use applied. It's going to tell you this is a user.
This is the one where you're explaining about like not being able to touch someone like the CEO.
Correct. So you will not be able to conduct this activity.
Who will be able to?
Specified users that are in that particular group, like me now. So if I'm no longer in the group, like let's go back here and go to that particular administrative unit. And I will add a user, not a group, sorry. I need to click that particular group. Now I'm going to add a user. I'm going to say I will add Luke and sample again, and myself, my regular account, I will add them here. So if I see them here now, they're here. If I click on my account and I say reset password, and still it's synchronized, takes a little bit of time. But once that happens, you won't be able to reset it anymore. It needs a couple of minutes to sync, but then you won't be able to reset it.
I'm curious to see Agent 365. Do you have it?
Not on this tenant. But if you want, like tomorrow, I'm in the office, I can show you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Almost the same question she asked is, you said you could be the global admin, but you cannot change the CEO password.
Yeah, so that's what I did now.
Who sets that permission?
So once you design these units, so this is in the administrative units, right? So you're the administrator of the tenant. And you will say here, CEO restrictive access. And I will say, yes. So what does this will tell me is if you take a look at here, you mark this unit, right? For restricted managements, you don't want tenant level administrators to be inherited. So once you add somebody in this group, everything from your tenant is not inherited in this group, which means that you need to define an admin in that tenant, in that particular group to reset the permissions or to reset the account. Anybody outside that group cannot control it.
So the administrative unit is basically the VIP unit.
Correct. That will prevent you from changing the credential there.
Could you show the conditional access policies?
Yeah, right now. So that should be here. We can scroll down to ID protection, dashboard. Conditional access.
This is very relevant for like anyone here in the audience that's like interested in, because we talked about SaaS. So for example, Microsoft Fabric or Power BI, their SaaS services. We always get questions from folks, how do we secure our data platform like if it's on Microsoft Fabric? So the way is through conditional access. So for those of you who are interested,
We can create one. You can just say now, let's say M365 login, right? We will just say it's going to apply to everybody. We will not create exceptions, right? So there are no exclusions. I'm going to include all the users. Target resources would be selected, and I can just say based on specific attributes or resources, and I can say here 365, right? Office. And that's it. So now anybody that wants to access Office 365 will have to follow the conditions that we set here.
do you see the list of possible conditions?
Yeah, you can see them here. So you have here user risk, right? You have sign-in risk, insider risk, device platform, location, client apps, and filter for devices. And you have also authentication flows, right? So you have different parameters here that you can actually configure. So I will say, I will allow from Windows only, which means that only Windows device will be allowed to use Office 365 in our case, or we can actually say, hey, I want to block. This one will be used for block Android, iOS, Windows Phone, Linux as an operating system. And my condition would be, block access. So now anybody accessing from an iPhone, from an Android, I will block access to Office 365 apps. Very simple. Now let's take a look another angle, right? So let's look into the condition of the user risk. And I will say we've identified that the user risk is high. So that particular user has a high risk associated with it. What can I do? I will just remove this as a condition. In the controls, I can say require risk remediation. Right? So what risk remediation will do is, you see it here. It's going to apply to all resources, right? But what else is going to happen? Users detected with risk, with the condition we've applied, high risk, will have to have all of their sessions revoked. Users that are known to have a password compromise will be forced to reset their passwords with a secure password change mechanism. So automatically, once we identify a high-risk user, anytime they try to use an application, because of the conditional access and continuous evaluation itself that's happening, we will basically remediate the risk automatically. Revoke the sessions, user will not access anything anymore. Any existing sessions will be removed, and the user will be asked to change the password. And other mechanisms, right? So, but as an example.
Peter, I'm wondering, so for example, for Azure services, we have like the well-architectured framework or something. Is there something similar for like Intra as well? Like let's say if I'm an organization, I'm just starting out, I don't know like which policies I should put and all that. Is there some sort of
Great question.
framework, just like what we have for Azure
There
services?
is not a framework, so to say, but there is something else related to it.
Something like Azure Advisor?
So when you see conditional access here, right, you have a policy summary here, and usually you'll see a lot of other things, right? But what does it matter? Create a new policy from template. So when you come here, we have across different pillars that we talk about, right? So you can set up secure foundation and you have a lot of policies here. It will be require multi-factor for admins, securing security team for registration, block legacy authentication. So policies are already, and these templates are ready. It's up to you to start enforcing. So you can start with these foundations, then slowly work your way through all of these other other options that are available, right?
There is one more way where you can go to admin.microsoft.com. And then you have organization and then best practices.
Correct.
From there, directly you can apply it.
Correct. But we're talking Entra primarily, right? So admin.microsoft.com is going to give you everything, like Exchange and Teams and many other.
And in an organization, whose role would be to manage this side? Is it would be like the not the InfoSec team, is it like the IT team, the governance team?
InfoSec is there to set the security requirements, right? So InfoSec should say, this is our policy, you need to implement it. Who needs to implement it? It can be your identity team, it can be your server team, it all where the responsibility for managing identity belongs to. Right. So a lot of things can be applied, right? And a lot of these templates are already out there, which means that you can start applying them in your organization as soon as possible. One thing I want to basically highlight, and this is something that's started happening very recent, a very well-known method for gaining access into a customer tenant is via device code authentication. So do you know what is device code authentication?
The MAC address?
No, you've all seen it in your, you do it at home. 99% of you have done it. Who has Netflix here? Have you opened Netflix on your TV? So when you signed in on Netflix on your TV, the TV gave you a code that you needed to log into your Netflix account and assign it. This is exactly the same from Entra. So a lot of bad people started sending phishing emails to customers or victims, right? That tells them, please go to this portal and do XYZ in order to keep your account safe, as an example. And you will be prompted in the same way where it will tell you, please paste in your device code that's given for your session, right? And automatically, once you do that, it will allow the threat actor same level of access with the user you logged in and provided the device code.
Won't you get like an email saying that unauthorized?
It's not unauthorized. So they prompted you. That's what I'm trying to say. So as you see here, like I've configured one condition primarily, right? Which is the authentication flow. And I said for the device code authentication flow, I want you to block access no matter what. Right? So this is the way we kind of secure these insecure or less secure mechanisms of authenticating against the tenant. So conditional access is there to basically serve as a firewall layer to protect your organization itself. We're out of time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, no one likes cold pizza, Peter.
Alrighty. Pizza time and questions outside, definitely.
All right, and also questions for the audience. 3 questions. And you know what? Feel free to ask questions from previous sessions as well. Give an opportunity for those who've been consistent.
It's all good. Allow me a couple of seconds just